Hey everyone, it's Jeff the IT guy, and here on the channel we like to look at products, and today it happens to be the Apple M1 iPad Pro 12.9 inch. This is the base model 12.9 inch, and so it features the M1 chip, 8 gigs of RAM, and I think it's 128 gig SSD in it. You can spec this out to be 2 terabytes, as well as with the M1 chip to have 16 gigs of RAM. And so this is a refresh of the 2018 model. And really the only thing that's different is there's 3 main differences between this and the 2018. You've got the new screen, which is mini LED XDR. And so it's like the Pro display kind of moved down into a 12.9 inch. And so this is an HDR screen. You got max brightness of like 1600 nits on it, viewing HDR content. So that's new. New as well as they put in the M1 chip, as mentioned before. So this is the same M1 chip that's in your MacBook Pros, your iMacs, your Mac Minis, your MacBook Airs, etc. And they gave us Thunderbolt support to use with dongles and stuff. And so you can actually, put in external storage. You can use docks, things of that nature with this machine. And so those are the 3 really big differences between the 2018 model and the 2021 model. Or was it 2019? Whatever. Who cares? At this point, an iPad's an iPad. Okay? And so we were all hoping with this new refresh of adding the M1 chip in here that at WWDC 21, which just happened earlier this week, that we would see some pro apps for the iPad to take use of the M1 chip. And so maybe it would be like Final Cut Pro for the iPad, Logic or whatever for the iPad. These pro grade apps that we love on our Macs that we'd also like to see on our iPad. However, that did not happen. WWDC 21 was kind of a letdown, in which really the only thing we're getting is iPad OS 15, and it's going to feature, some multitasking features, as well as some widgets and just a couple upgrades. Really nothing that we were kind of hoping for, right? The multitasking, that's going to be cool, and so are the widgets. But other than that, though, we did not get our pro apps. And so this machine is kind of in an odd space, right? It really is. It's 12.9 inch, so it's about the size of a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro. It features the same chip as the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. However, it's running a different iOS. It's touchscreen, or a different OS, not iOS, but it's running a different OS. It's touchscreen, and it's got some upgrades that would make you think that it's Pro. But is it really Pro? Yeah, you've got this excellent screen, and I'll show you what it looks like to watch content on it. You've got that. You've got, your Thunderbolt support to where you can use docks and things like that. You can use external storage. That's really about it. And you got the M1 chip. And so it almost makes you wonder, what is it that Apple's thinking? And so I'm going to lay it out for you. When you look at chip manufacturing, you have a chip. It comes in like a disc. And not all of these chips are the same. However, when you refine the process, you can start getting better yields from those chips. Now, previously, before this, they were using the A14X or whatever it is, the Bionic chip. That's also, your phones, your iPhone 12s and stuff have the A whatever Bionic chip in it. And that's a different architecture than the M1. And so by Apple moving towards this unified architecture of the M1 chip, what that means is they don't have to make different chips. And so they can refine that process and have a higher yield. And so you get what's called economies of scale. And economies of scale is where you have a graph, right? And so this graph goes in a U, right? And you've got this point to where your yield and your cost start to come to a point to where the yield that you're at is at the lowest cost. And if you go above that yield, your cost starts to go up. And if you're below that yield, your cost starts to go up. And so when we're looking at it like that, with Apple moving towards this, what it does is it increases their revenue and their profit. And so from a business mindset, it's very smart for them to move this iPad towards to the M1 chip. And I would say in the future that we're going to see Apple start to move everything to some form of the M1 chip, or the M1 architecture, as we'll call it, that architecture. And what they'll have is they'll have different SKUs. And so we'll start to see kind of like what Intel and AMD does. So Intel has their i9 series that goes all the way down to i3. All right, and so really what happens is these are made off the same wafer, but only a certain number of those yield the number of cores and everything like that to be considered an i9. And then you have some on that same wafer that yield to be an i7, some that yield on that same wafer to be an i5, and then the lowest ones are i3s, right? And so what it does is it allows you to make one wafer, and you can fit different SKUs, and what they are, they're just pared down from the highest end chip that comes off of that wafer. And that's probably what we're going to start seeing from Apple, is their Pro series of products are going to feature the highest end SKUs, and then everything that doesn't meet that is going to fit into a product segment below that. And that's what I predict that Apple is going to do, because it makes sense from a business standpoint. And so that is why Apple has moved these iPads to the M1 chip. Unfortunately, it also makes sense for them to not start putting a lot of Pro apps on this, because it can mess with the other segments of their business. And so if your iPad starts to be not only a tablet but a laptop replacement, and it can do the Pro apps that we think of on our Macs, then that right there is could potentially hinder the sales of their other product SKUs. And so from a business standpoint, that's why Apple is doing this. And so the new iPad, it is great. It is great. It's very quick. The pen on it is excellent. The screen on it's excellent. Great viewing experience. Having the Thunderbolt support is really good, because you can, do a lot of different things on this that can take advantage of that external port. You can connect it to a monitor. So you can do a lot of stuff. And so it's almost to the point to where it is a laptop replacement. And you can use iMovie on this. And so you can, work with your videos and stuff on iMovie, right? And so you can use your external support with Thunderbolt to use a drive or whatever, a monitor, and you can use iMovie on this. So you can use this to do iMovie. So you can actually do, your video projects. It's not the same as Final Cut, of course. You're going to have things like Adobe Rush. And there's a lot of different apps that come out for these. Now, do I see that there's going to be an app that really utilizes the M1 from Apple? Probably not within the next year or so, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so what I would say is that if you have a 2018 iPad Pro or 2019, whatever it is, and you just use it like you would just a regular iPad or whatever, like you had no expectations that you were going to be able to, replace your laptops and everything with this and use Final Cut, I would say don't upgrade. Now, if you don't have an iPad and you want like a superior viewing experience, maybe you're an artist, if you're an artist, this is fantastic. Like if you're doing a lot of art and stuff, this screen is excellent for that. You're really going to be able to create some really nice art on this machine, right? So if you're an artist, that's what it's for. That's what I would say this is for, as an artist. But like if you're going to college and maybe you're not a CS student or an IT student, but you need an iPad, and you're like, well, maybe I want both an iPad, but I also want a laptop, then this is going to fit that gap if you're a student. You know, you can take your notes on it. You can write your papers on it. There's a lot of great apps for that. This is going to fit that bill. Now, if you're a professional that's not an artist, such as myself in IT, you know, I really don't know. That's one of the things I'm going to look at later on is how can I fit this into my 9-to-5 job? How can I use this to replace my laptop in my 9-to-5 job as an IT professional? And so I'm going to do a video on that of how it worked out for me, if it worked out, you know, and what my hindrances were and what it excelled at. So, you know, you can take it or leave it. Like I said, my recommendation is that if you have an iPad already, you don't need to upgrade to this. You really don't. If you don't have an iPad and you're looking for something that bridges the gap between an iPad and a laptop, then yeah, this is for you. But it's going to be pretty expensive. You'd be better off finding a refurbed MacBook Air and maybe like an iPad Air. You know, you'd probably come in cheaper than this, unless you just have to have the newest of the new. And so even though it does feature a lot of great things like the screen, the Thunderbolt support, and the M1 chip, you know, it doesn't really make sense to me. It makes sense to me from their business standpoint, but as a consumer, it really doesn't make sense to me. Listen, this has been Jeff the IT guy. This has probably been a little bit of a ramble, but you know, it is what it is. You learned something about business, though. You learned something about business and about chips and things of that nature. So go ahead, and if you like this video, leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Like I said, we're going to be looking at this and seeing how we can fit it into an IT professional workflow, if it can replace my laptop. We're going to do some like top, you know, products to use with this, some accessories that are really going to help you get the most out of the iPad. We're also going to do to see like how a Dell XPS can replace my desktop, and so I forced myself to use a Dell XPS for my everyday everything, work, everything for a month, and we'll talk about that experience and where it excelled, where it hindered, things of that nature. And we've got some other stuff coming up here on the channel, so there's going to be a lot of cool stuff happening. As always, thanks for watching. Have a nice day and keep it real.